Over the next 2 hours, we're putting Dexter Morgan head-to-head with the FBI, breaking down his psychology, forensic trail, behavioral patterns, and the exact points where the Bureau would close in. If you enjoy detailed analysis like this one, subscribe for more. First up, we've got intelligence. Forensic genius versus behavioral science unit. Dexter Morgan operated with a mind like a surgical instrument, fine-tuned for one purpose: getting away with murder. Throughout the series, Dexter excelled academically and absorbed every detail about blood spatter analysis, turning that knowledge into a career at Miami Metro Police Department. While other analysts saw stains and patterns, Dexter saw complete narratives, written in arterial spray and pooling. He consistently demonstrated this ability at crime scenes, determining angles of impact, victim positioning, and killer characteristics from blood patterns while his colleagues were still processing what they were seeing. His intelligence went beyond lab work. Dexter hacked police servers without leaving traces, spoofed digital evidence, and deleted security footage. When LaGuerta found a blood slide at Travis Marshall's crime scene in Season 6 finale and began reinvestigating the Bay Harbor Butcher case in Season 7, Dexter didn't panic. In the Season 7 finale, Episode 12, he fed her misinformation, planted evidence to frame Hector Estrada, and made her look unstable to colleagues. He dismantled her case piece by piece until she lost all credibility, ultimately cornering her at the shipping yard while Deborah was forced to shoot LaGuerta to protect him. His intelligence was a scalpel, precise, controlled, and devastatingly effective when wielded alone. Could that surgical precision stand up to an opponent who's multiplied it across thousands of minds though? Let's talk about the FBI. The Behavioral Analysis Unit was built around decades of accumulated knowledge, thousands of solved cases, and systematic profiling techniques refined over generations. Agents like John Douglas and Robert Ressler didn't just catch killers, they interviewed them, studied them, and built psychological profiles that predicted behavior with terrifying accuracy. The FBI established the Behavioral Science Unit in 1972, which evolved into today's Behavioral Analysis Unit. Between 1972 and the mid-1980s, agents interviewed 36 incarcerated serial killers to build their profiling database. In 1985, they created VICAP, or the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, a database containing details on thousands of violent crimes across the country. They cross-referenced victim types, geographic patterns, cooling-off periods, and crime scene signatures. Dexter's intelligence kept him hidden. The FBI's intelligence was designed specifically to find people like him. When the FBI tracked down Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, they built a profile, monitored communications, and traced metadata on a floppy disk he sent them. Rader thought he was being clever. The Bureau was 3 steps ahead. Dexter could hack Miami Metro's outdated systems, but the FBI operates with encryption, redundant backups, and cybersecurity protocols that make local police databases look primitive. One slip, one digital fingerprint, and their cyber division would triangulate him before he finished logging out. One mind, no matter how sharp, can't compete with a machine built to hunt. So the winner in this case would be the FBI. Dexter's surgical intelligence against the FBI's systematic infrastructure? Sorry, but individual genius sets a ceiling. Institutional knowledge doesn't. But before we dive into how Dexter's solo operation compared to the FBI's manhunt infrastructure, if you're enjoying this breakdown so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button. This analysis is just getting started. Dexter's forensic genius allowed him to evade detection at crime scenes. Working completely alone gave him total control over every variable. Yet that same isolation becomes a critical vulnerability when facing an agency that never operates alone. We're talking about the comparison between solo killing and multi-agency manhunts. Dexter Morgan's greatest tactical advantage was operating in total isolation. No partners, no backup, no one who could make mistakes that exposed his work. From the moment Harry taught him the code, Dexter learned to operate alone. He studied his targets for weeks, sometimes months, learning their routines, homes, and weaknesses. His kill rooms were masterpieces of preparation. Plastic sheeting covering every surface, tools laid out in perfect order, sedatives calculated to the milligram. In Season 4, he spent weeks studying Arthur Mitchell, the Trinity Killer, before attempting to kill him, learning every detail of his patterns and family life. Complete control, zero loose ends. He controlled every variable because he had to. One missed detail, one witness, one drop of blood in the wrong place, and 20 years of work would collapse. Yet isolation also means limitations. He couldn't be in 2 places at once. He couldn't monitor multiple suspects simultaneously. He couldn't run plates, track phone records, or access federal databases. Everything required him to be physically there, exposed, vulnerable. His strength doubled as his fundamental weakness. So while Dexter perfected the art of hunting alone, the FBI perfected something far more dangerous. When the FBI decides to hunt someone, they send task force, multiple field offices, local law enforcement, state police, and the US Marshals, creating a net that closes fast. Look at Ted Bundy. He escaped custody twice, crossed state lines, changed his appearance, and lived under false names. The FBI still found him, not because one detective got lucky, but because hundreds of agents coordinated across regions, shared information in real time, and tightened the noose. In 1978, FBI agents created a psychological profile that helped place Bundy on the 10 most wanted list, and within 5 days, he was caught. Or take the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, who operated for 17 years with no witnesses and no physical evidence. The FBI built a profile, analyzed his writings, published his manifesto, and when his brother recognized the writing style, the Bureau moved in with overwhelming force. The FBI has surveillance teams that rotate shifts, analysts who work around the clock, forensic accountants who trace financial activity, and digital specialists who monitor online behavior. When they identify a target, they don't rush in, they watch, gather evidence, build an airtight case, and then move. One man can only do so much. A federal agency with unlimited jurisdiction and thousands of personnel? That's an avalanche. Dexter's isolation gave him control, but against a coordinated federal response, that same isolation would trap him with nowhere to run. So once again, the winner is the FBI. Solo operation does equal complete control, like I keep saying, until faced with a coordinated machine that never sleeps. Dexter isolation gave him the power until it became his critical vulnerability against a multi-agency response. Operating in isolation only mattered if nobody suspected him in the first place, which brings us to Dexter's most powerful weapon, a mask so convincing that even trained detectives never saw through it. The FBI, however, has spent decades learning how to see through masks exactly like his. Dexter Morgan manufactured a persona so convincing that he became invisible in plain sight. The awkward smile, the bad jokes, the quiet forensic analyst who brought donuts to the office and never caused problems. Camouflage designed to make him invisible. In Season 2, while at Eddie's Diner with his NA sponsor Lila Tourney, Dexter first uses the term dark passenger to describe his homicidal urges, the entity he had been carrying since witnessing his mother's murder in a shipping container at age 3. Throughout the series, Dexter's dark passenger represented his psychological need to kill, which he learned to suppress and channel through Harry's code. In Season 6 finale, This Is the Way the World Ends, Dexter stood over Travis Marshall's body, a man who he had just killed, and gave a flawless forensic analysis to his colleagues. No hesitation, no cracks. The mask had become a part of him. His calm under pressure was textbook psychopathic detachment. Emotions didn't cloud his judgment. Fear didn't trigger mistakes. When Dokes trapped him in Season 2, Episode 9, Resistance is Futile, Dexter's heart rate stayed steady. His thoughts stayed clear. He didn't panic. He calculated. The mask worked because people took his performance at face value, never looking deeper, accepting what they wanted to see. But there's a problem with masks that fool human observation. The FBI doesn't rely on what they see. The FBI builds comprehensive psychological profiles based on decades of research that predict behavior patterns with terrifying accuracy. The Behavioral Analysis Unit, like we said, was established in 1972, evolving from the Behavioral Science Unit. Like mentioned prior, agents like Robert Ressler, who actually coined the term serial killer in 1974, John Douglas and Howard Teeton pioneered criminal profiling by interviewing 36 incarcerated serial killers between 1972 and the mid-1980s. They developed the organized versus disorganized killer dichotomy. Organized killers, like Dexter, plan meticulously, display control over victims, leave little forensic evidence, and maintain normal appearances in daily life. The FBI created a 6-step criminal investigative analysis process that classifies crime scenes, integrates behavioral patterns, and generates detailed psychological profiles. When they interviewed Gary Ridgway, the Green River killer who evaded capture for 20 years, FBI interrogators didn't attack him, they empathized with him, made him feel understood, and used his own psychology against him. Ridgway confessed to 48 murders, not because they broke him with pressure, but because they made confession feel like it was his idea. The FBI studies interview techniques specifically designed for psychopaths, building rapport, using tactical empathy, analyzing microexpressions and linguistic patterns. They use geographic profiling to map crime locations and predict where offenders live or work. They analyze victim selection patterns, signature behavior versus modus operandi, trophy collection tendencies, and control dynamics. When the FBI profiled Ted Bundy in 1978, they accurately predicted he was intelligent, charming, mobile, targeted young women at venues like college campuses and resorts, and would continue escalating. They profiled Dexter as a highly organized, mission-oriented killer with a code, likely working in law enforcement, with a need for control and methodical planning. His mask wouldn't fool them. They interviewed dozens of killers exactly like him and know every psychological tell, every behavioral pattern, every predictable trait. So once again, the winner is the FBI. Dexter's math fooled individuals who took his performance at face value. FBI profilers don't accept anything at face value. They spent decades studying killers exactly like Dexter, and know every pattern he thinks that makes him unique. Even the perfect psychological profile means nothing without physical evidence. Dexter thought he had the ultimate advantage, his meticulous crime scene preparation. The FBI has technology that operates on a completely different level. Dexter built his survival on meticulous crime scene preparation, using bleach, plastic wrap, and careful body disposal to leave absolutely no trace of evidence behind. Dexter cleaned his crime scenes with bleach and plastic wrap. He dumped bodies in the ocean, weighed down with biodegradable bags. He left no fingerprints, no DNA, no witnesses. In Season 2, when scuba divers accidentally discovered his underwater burial ground off the coast of Miami, 18 dismembered bodies were recovered, all belonging to known killers who had slipped through the justice system. The FBI dubbed him the Bay Harbor Butcher and launched a massive investigation led by Special Agent Frank Lundy. Despite having physical evidence, Miami Metro and the FBI never identified Dexter because he controlled every physical detail. In his mind, he was untouchable. The mask worked because people believed he was harmless through his persona. His camouflage targeted human observation, the awkward forensic analyst who seemed incapable of violence. This approach had a fatal flaw. While Dexter cleaned surfaces by hand with bleach, forensic technology advanced far beyond what the human eye could detect or what traditional cleaning could eliminate. The FBI had been developing tools that could find what Dexter thought that he had erased forever. The FBI trusts forensic technology that operates on a level that makes human camouflage completely irrelevant. Luminol can detect blood traces invisible to the naked eye, even after extensive cleaning. DNA analysis has advanced to the point to where they can extract genetic profiles from skin cells left on surfaces touched once years ago. They have forensic genealogy now, the same technology that caught the Golden State Killer after decades of inactivity. All it took was a distant relative's DNA uploaded to a public database. The FBI uses geofencing. They can pull location data from every phone in a specific area during a specific time window. If Dexter was anywhere near a crime scene when a victim disappeared, his phone would ping. If that pattern repeated, the algorithm would flag him automatically. The FBI uses drones, thermal imaging, license plate readers, and facial recognition software tied into databases that catalogs millions of faces. If they identified Dexter as a person of interest, they could track every place he went, every person he met, every transaction he made. They wouldn't need to see him kill someone. They just need to see him deviating from normal patterns at the exact times that victims went missing. Was Dexter careful enough to avoid leaving a single epithelial cell at a crime scene? One microscopic trace, and the Bureau could build a profile, run it through CODIS, cross-reference it with familial DNA databases, and suddenly his anonymity would evaporate. Data doesn't lie. One forensic match, one cell tower ping, one security camera. That's all that it would take. So, once again, the winner is the FBI. Social camouflage against forensic technology that can extract DNA from a surface touched once years ago? Dexter's methods were designed for 2006. The FBI's technology is built for 2025 and beyond. But what do you think? Could Dexter's mask have fooled FBI interrogators, or would they have seen right through it? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Forensic evidence only matters when you can get the suspect into custody. Dexter's real superpower emerges here, the ability to stay ice cold when everything falls apart. Even that psychopathic calm has a breaking point when facing FBI interrogation techniques designed specifically to find it. Dexter Morgan lived for pressure. When things got close, when the walls started closing in, his psychopathic traits kept him ice cold. His heart rate stayed steady. His thoughts stayed cleared. He didn't panic. He calculated. When Dokes found him in mid-setup in Season 2, Dexter cleaned up, played it casual, and walked out like it was a misunderstanding. When LaGuerta found a bloodslide at Travis Marshall's crime scene in Season 6 finale and reopened the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation in Season 7, Dexter stayed 3 steps ahead. She had a timeline, motive, and partial evidence. In the Season 7 finale, Episode 12, LaGuerta even had Dexter arrested at the shipping yard, but he had already lured Hector Estrada there to make it look like LaGuerta was chasing the wrong suspect. When she pulled her gun on Dexter, Deborah arrived and was forced to shoot LaGuerta to save him. Dexter dismantled every piece of her investigation while showing up to work, smiling at Harrison, and playing the perfect single dad. Emotions didn't cloud his judgment. Fear didn't trigger mistakes. Dexter operated with complete emotional control because he felt virtually nothing. His mask required performance, and that performance stayed sustainable as long as he controlled the environment and set the terms of engagement, in isolation when manipulating his surroundings. Dexter's control was absolute. Miami Metro detectives and local investigators weren't trained in advanced psychological interrogation. The FBI was. FBI interrogators use psychology, pattern recognition, and exhaustive preparation to systematically break even the most controlled suspects over extended sessions. Before an FBI agent walks into an interrogation room, they've already studied everything about the suspect. Prior statements, financial records, travel history, known associates. They've even identified every inconsistency, every gap, every lie waiting to surface. They don't accuse, they empathize, build rapport, and make the suspect feel like cooperation is the smart move. While doing this, they're watching micro-expressions, body language, changes in breathing and hesitations. When the FBI brought in Gary Ridgway, the Green River killer who had killed for 20 years without getting caught, he was calm, controlled, ready to deny everything. The interrogators talked to him about his life and motivations. They made him feel understood. Slowly, piece by piece, Ridgway started talking, confessing to 48 murders. In an FBI interrogation room, Dexter wouldn't control anything. The temperature would be set to make him uncomfortable. The chairs would be positioned to create subtle psychological dominance. The questions would come in waves, aggressive and sympathetic, designed to create cognitive dissonance and trap him in contradictions. Dexter's mask requires sustained performance. In an interrogation lasting 6, 8, 12 hours, maintaining that performance becomes impossible. Exhaustion sets in, focus slips, and when it does, the real person underneath starts showing through. One slip, one inconsistency, one answer that doesn't match a previous statement, that's all it takes. So, once again, the FBI is the winner. Dexter's ice-cold control against FBI interrogators who broke in serial killers with decades more experience? Don't get me wrong, his psychopathic calm would last hours. Their interrogation techniques, though, are designed to last days until the mask cracks. If you thought Dexter's control under interrogation was impressive, why don't you see what happens when he decided Miami had become too dangerous and it was time to vanish completely? Dexter Morgan understood that vanishing meant becoming so unremarkable that even people looking directly at you don't see anything worth remembering. When everything fell apart in Miami at the end of season 8, Dexter didn't leave a trail. The slice of light went straight into Hurricane Laura and never came back. No body, no evidence, just a boat lost to the storm. Within weeks, Dexter Morgan faded from memory. Years later, in Dexter New Blood, we see him in Iron Lake, New York, living as Jim Lindsay, a guy with a job at Fred's Fish and Game Shop, a cabin outside town, and a girlfriend who happened to be the chief of police, Angela Bishop. Nearly a decade passed with 0 kills until Matt Caldwell and 0 investigations. He didn't just avoid suspicion. He built a life so small and ordinary that nobody looked twice. He worked a normal job, paid taxes under his new identity, and blended into a community where everyone knew everyone. Dexter survived in Iron Lake because nobody was looking for him. Miami Metro thought he was dead. The Bay Harbor Butcher case was closed. There was no manhunt, no active investigation, no federal resources deployed. He disappeared because law enforcement let him. But what happens when they don't let you disappear? When they activate every resource designed to find you? When the FBI decides that a suspect is alive and operational, they activate a nationwide infrastructure specifically designed to close every possible exit and make disappearing impossible. When a suspect goes on the run, the Bureau doesn't just send agents to known locations. They activate fugitive task force that coordinate with US Marshals, state police, Border Patrol, and even Interpol. They flag passports, freeze bank accounts, and monitor credit card activity in real time. They distribute BOLO alerts to every law enforcement agency in the country. Whitey Bulger disappeared for 16 years with money, connections, and decades of criminal experience. He moved constantly, used fake identities, and stayed off the grid, and the FBI still found him. They aged his photographs using forensic software, monitored tips, and followed up on every sighting. When a tip pointed them to Santa Monica, they moved within days. If the FBI ever connected Dexter Morgan to a pattern of unsolved murders in Miami and reclassified him as an active fugitive, the entire infrastructure would activate. They'd analyze his habits, his psychological profile, his likely destinations, probably rural communities where someone could live quietly. Once they narrowed the search area, facial recognition would do the rest. Every security camera, every DMV photo, every social media post with someone in the background. The FBI doesn't need Dexter to make a mistake. They need one person to upload a photo with him in it, and the algorithm flags it automatically. Dexter worked at a bait shop, which means a W-2, tax filings, and a social security number. The moment the FBI pulled employment records for Jim Lindsay and ran them against biometric databases, they know. One fingerprint from a background check, one photo ID scanned into a state system. His face would be on the news, his photo in every police station. and agents would be knocking on doors in Iron Lake within 72 hours. So, once again, the winner is the FBI. Dexter disappeared because nobody was actively hunting him. Against an active FBI manhunt with facial recognition, financial tracking, and nationwide coordination, his Iron Lake anonymity would last weeks, not years. Dexter Morgan was brilliant, methodical, precise, and for over 20 years he operated in plain sight, surrounded by cops, and never got caught. He built a system that worked. He followed the code. He controlled every variable. But all of that worked was because he was hunting individuals, people who didn't see him coming, people who couldn't coordinate, people who were isolated, vulnerable, and outmatched. The FBI is an institution, thousands of agents, decades of research, technology that operated beyond human limitations, and infrastructure that spans the entire country. The Bureau doesn't need to outthink him, it just needs to outlast him. Dexter's intelligence was surgical. The FBI's intelligence is systemic. Dexter operated alone, the FBI operates as a coordinated machine. Dexter cleaned crime scenes by hand, the FBI has forensic labs that can extract DNA from a surface touched once years ago, as I keep mentioning. Dexter built a persona to fool the people around him, and the FBI doesn't care about personas. They care about evidence, data, and patterns. If Dexter existed in the real world, he wouldn't last 5 years. Not against the Behavioral Analysis Unit, not against CODIS and VICAP, not against facial recognition, cell tower tracking, and forensic genealogy. Not against interrogators trained to break people who've spent their entire lives learning how to lie. He was a ghost in Miami because Miami Metro didn't know what they were looking for. But the FBI would know. They'd profile him, they'd track him, and they'd close in long before Dexter realized the net was tightening. One man with a code versus the most powerful investigative force in the world. The game would have been over before Dexter even knew it had begun. And Dexter would have been the first one to know it. That's why he stayed small. That's why he stayed local. Because the moment the FBI got involved, everything he built for 20 years would collapse in days. Next, we shift from theory to scale, breaking down why Dexter taking on the FBI's most wanted list wouldn't even be a close contest. Dexter Morgan never rushed a kill. Every target got weeks or months of careful watching before he ever made a move. Throughout the series, Dexter showed obsessive preparation. In Season 1, when tracking the ice truck killer, he spent weeks analyzing crime scenes and patterns before figuring out his biological brother, Brian Moser, was behind it. In Season 4, Dexter spent over a month studying Arthur Mitchell, the Trinity Killer. He went to Mitchell's public appearances, followed him home, and even pretended to be a guy named Kyle Butler to get inside Mitchell's family life. He learned Mitchell's pattern, burying a young boy, bleeding a woman in a bathtub, pushing a woman to her death, and beating a father of 2 to a death with a hammer. Dexter tracked Mitchell's construction charity work across multiple states, wrote down his movements, and only went for the kill after he had overwhelming proof that Mitchell deserved it according to the code. This approach gave Dexter complete control over his targets. He knew their schedules, their habits, and where they were vulnerable. When he finally moved, his victims never saw it coming. The preparation meant no rushing, no panic, no mistakes from acting too fast. He studied blood patterns for his job, understood crime scene investigation, and used that knowledge to avoid leaving evidence behind. His kill rooms took hours to set up. Plastic sheets measured and taped down, tools cleaned and organized, sedatives measured based on body weight. That level of control meant something huge. Dexter had time. Time to watch, time to plan, time to make everything perfect before doing anything. So how does that stack up against fugitives who had federal agents breathing down their necks while just trying to stay alive? FBI's most wanted fugitives rarely got to plan anything. They lived in constant panic, making split-second choices while law enforcement tracked them everywhere. Ted Bundy escaped from Colorado jail twice in 1977. The first time, he jumped out a courthouse window during his hearing. The second time, he cut through his cell ceiling, crawled through air ducts, and dropped into a guard's apartment. After that second escape, Bundy stole cars, used stolen credit cards, and killed 3 more women within weeks. He was falling apart. Planning had gone out the window. Police caught him in Pensacola, Florida just 6 days after killing Kimberly Leach. He was driving a stolen Volkswagen Beetle so badly that a cop pulled him over for a traffic stop. All that careful planning that made Bundy dangerous before his arrest completely vanished once he was running. When the FBI puts someone on the most wanted list, planning stops and surviving starts. Every choice becomes about right now, finding food, finding shelter, finding a way to move, while federal agents work across state lines, track money, and put photos in every police station nationwide. Eric Rudolph, the Olympic Park bomber, spent 5 years hiding in the Appalachian Mountains to stay free. He survived by digging through trash, stealing from cabins, and living in the woods. That kept him from getting caught, but he was just surviving. He couldn't plan, he couldn't move freely, he could only hide. Dexter spent months preparing each kill. Most wanted fugitives spend months just trying to wake up tomorrow without handcuffs. So the winner is Dexter. Careful preparation with all the time in the world versus fugitives forced to make a panic decision every day. Planning wins when nobody's actively hunting you. But before we break down Dexter's isolation compared to fugitive support networks, if you're finding this analysis interesting, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We're just getting started. Dexter's preparation gave him control when he set the timeline. That advantage disappears the second someone starts hunting you, which brings us to the next big difference: resources and support. Alone by design versus criminal networks. Dexter Morgan ran a completely independent operation. No accomplices, no criminal contacts, no outside help that could flip on him or leave trails. From the very first episode, Dexter worked alone. He didn't need money launderers, safe houses, or criminal buddies. His normal life gave him everything: a real paycheck from Miami Metro, an apartment in his own name, a boat for dumping bodies. In season 2, when Lila West killed Dokes in that Everglades cabin, Dexter didn't thank her. He cut her out completely because she had become a problem he couldn't control. When his brother Brian wanted them to team up in season 1's finale, Born Free, offering to kill together, Dexter killed Brian instead. The code demanded it, and partnerships meant vulnerabilities. And Dexter knew blood. He lived in Iron Lake for almost 10 years without a single partner, keeping his Jim Lindsay cover by going entirely through a regular job and fitting into the community. No partners meant no betrayals. Dexter never worried about someone getting busted and making a deal. He never feared a partner talking. He controlled all the information because he was the only person who had it. This total self-reliance extended to his kills. He didn't need to buy untraceable weapons or hire specialists. He worked in forensics, which gave him access to M99 animal tranquilizer, knowledge about getting rid of bodies, and inside understanding of how investigations work. Operating alone also means limits though. No one to back up his alibi, no one to help if things went sideways, no network to help him vanish if cops closed in. Which makes you wonder, how did fugitives with entire criminal organizations helping them do when the FBI decided that they need to be caught? Many FBI most wanted fugitives had huge criminal networks, tons of money, and international connections, advantages that should have kept them hidden forever. James Whitey Bulger spent 16 years on the FBI's most wanted list with about $25 million in cash, serious criminal connections, and decades of experience running Boston's organized crime. He kept moving: New York, Louisiana, Wyoming, California, using fake names and paying cash for everything. His brother William was a powerful Massachusetts State Senate president. Bulger even had corrupt FBI agents who warned him before his 1994 indictment, giving him time to run. Despite all those advantages, the FBI found him in Santa Monica in 2011, after a neighbor recognized his girlfriend from an FBI publicity campaign. Osama bin Laden had an entire terrorist network protecting him, safe houses in Pakistan, and money from Al-Qaeda's worldwide operations. The FBI, working with the military and CIA, still found him after 10 years. Resources and networks gave these fugitives short-term wins, but those same networks created weak spots. Every person who knows where you are could become an informant. Every money move can be traced. Every contact becomes a risk. Bulger's girlfriend gave him away. Bin Laden's courier led operatives to his compound. The second a fugitive depends on other people, they bring in variables they can't control. Dexter never had that problem because he never created those weak points. So once again, the winner is Dexter. Criminal networks do give you resources, but introduce fatal weak spots. Dexter's total independence meant that nobody could snitch, because nobody knew anything. Dexter's self-sufficiency kept him invisible, but that only worked if he could stay hidden when law enforcement started looking. So let's see how his hiding tactics measured up. Dexter Morgan knew that the best hiding spot was right out in the open. A regular job, a regular house, a regular life that gave investigators absolutely nothing suspicious to find. Throughout the original series, Dexter kept a steady cover. He worked at Miami Metro Homicide, went to department meetings, showed up at crime scenes, and helped with investigations. In season 3, he became friends with Assistant District Attorney Miguel Prado, going to social events and building relationships that made his normal guy act even more believable. He married Rita Bennett, a single mother with 2 kids, and in season 4, they had a son together, Harrison. He bought a house, paid a mortgage, filed taxes, and showed up in public records as a boring forensic analyst. Even after faking his death in Hurricane Laura at the end of season 8, Dexter rebuilt the exact same type of life in Iron Lake, working at Fred's fishing game, dating the police chief Angela Bishop, and living in a cabin where he knew his neighbors and participated in town stuff. This approach turned normal life into a weapon. Investigators looked for weird patterns, people who only pay cash, dodge cameras, moved around constantly, have no work history. Dexter had none of those red flags. He existed in every database exactly like he should. His bank account showed regular paychecks from real jobs. His tax returns matched what he said he earned. His social media, barely there but present, showed a boring suburban dad. When Miami Metro investigated the Bay Harbor Butcher in Season 2, Dexter sat in the room helping crack the case. He looked at evidence, suggested theories, and helped build the profile of the killer himself, while Special Agent Frank Lundy ran the federal task force. The brilliance was simple. If you look like everyone else, nobody looks at you. But what about fugitives who couldn't blend in because their faces were plastered on wanted posters in every police station and post office across America? When someone lands on the FBI's 10 most wanted list, blending in becomes impossible. Their face is everywhere, pushing them into total isolation and constant running. Robert William Fisher allegedly killed his wife and 2 children in Scottsdale, Arizona in 2001, then blew up the house and vanished. The FBI put him on the 10 most wanted list in 2002. Despite reporting sightings across the western United States and Mexico, Fisher has never been found. The FBI thinks he probably died in the wilderness, but his disappearance required cutting himself off completely from society. He couldn't get a job, couldn't rent a place, couldn't use his real name for anything. Ted Bundy, after his 1977 escape, tried blending in to Tallahassee, Florida, using a stolen credit card and living in a cheap boarding house. Within weeks, his photo had been spread enough that people recognized him, forcing him to keep moving. Police caught him shortly after. The FBI's 10 most wanted list goes out to roughly 18,000 law enforcement agencies. Photos hit border crossings, airports, bus stations, hotels. Media coverage makes everyone aware. The publicity makes normal life impossible. You can't walk into a bank, rent an apartment, or fill out a job application without risking someone recognizing you. Eric Rudolph survived 5 years in the Appalachian Mountains by avoiding people almost entirely. He lived off what he could steal and scavenge. A rookie police officer in Murphy, North Carolina, caught him in 2003 digging through a dumpster behind a Save-A-Lot grocery store at 4 a.m. 5 years of perfect hiding ended because he needed food. Dexter went to work every morning at a police station. Most wanted fugitives couldn't even go to a grocery store without risking everything. So once again, our winner is Dexter. Living a normal life in plain sight versus being forced underground with your face on every wanted poster? Visibility wins when you're not actually being hunted. Hiding in plain sight only worked because Dexter never triggered the one thing that destroys anonymity, which brings us to how law enforcement attention gets activated in the first place. Dexter Morgan specifically targeted people society wouldn't miss. Killers who slipped through the justice system. Criminals already hiding from law enforcement. The code Harry taught Dexter was specific. Only kill people who are guilty of murder, who've escaped legal justice. Throughout the series, Dexter's targets were drug dealers, child molesters, serial killers, and violent criminals. In Season 2, when scuba divers accidentally found his underwater graveyard off Miami coast, they recovered 18 dismembered bodies. Every single one belonged to a known criminal. People with records, people who evaded prosecution, people who slipped through legal cracks. When the FBI dubbed him the Bay Harbor Butcher and launched a massive investigation led by Special Agent Frank Lundy, they built a profile, but they struggled with motive because the victims were all violent criminals themselves. The victim selection had a strategic genius. Nobody was looking for these people. When a drug dealer vanishes, other criminals don't file missing person reports. When a killer who beat a murder charge disappears, detectives don't launch investigations. Dexter's body count could climb because he was removing people from a world that already operated in shadows. The Bay Harbor Butcher investigation only happened because of accidental discovery. Divers looking for treasure stumbled onto his dumping ground. Without that accident, Dexter's victims would stay missing indefinitely. Compare that to fugitives whose crimes were so public, so violent, so impossible to ignore that law enforcement had no choice but to make them priority targets. FBI most wanted fugitives typically committed crimes so public and devastating that law enforcement couldn't ignore them even if they wanted to. Eric Robert Rudolph bombed Centennial Olympic Park during the 1996 Atlanta Olympics, killing 1 person and injuring 111 others. The attack happened during the world's biggest sporting event, with international media coverage. The FBI had no choice but to make him a priority. He was added to the 10 most wanted list in 1998 and caught in 2003. Timothy McVeigh bombed the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City in 1995, killing 168 people, including 19 children. The blast destroyed the building and damaged 324 other structures within a 16-block radius. The manhunt for McVeigh involved every federal agency. He was caught within 90 minutes of the bombing during a routine traffic stop, but if he escaped, the entire country would have been hunting him. These crimes demanded federal response. Public bombings, mass casualties, attacks that made national news. Law enforcement didn't look the other way. The scale and visibility forced resource allocation. When Ted Bundy escaped and killed 3 more victims in Florida, including 12-year-old Kimberly Leach, the media coverage was massive. His photo appeared everywhere. Witnesses came forward. Tips flooded in. The FBI created a profile and put him on the 10 most wanted list. He was caught within weeks. Dexter killed over 135 people across more than 20 years. Until that accidental discovery in season 2, nobody even knew that those people were dead, let alone murdered by the same person. So once again, our winner is Dexter, selecting invisible victims who nobody was looking for versus committing public attacks that forced massive law enforcement response. Invisibility beats infamy when staying free is the goal. So what do you think? Could Dexter's victim selection have kept him off law enforcement's radar forever? Or would modern technology eventually catch him anyway? Drop your comments below. Dexter Morgan killed for over 20 years. He operated inside a police department surrounded by homicide detectives, and nobody suspected him. He built a system that worked. He followed the code. He stayed invisible. Most wanted fugitives operated under the full weight of federal manhunts. Photos distributed to thousands of agencies. Massive rewards offered. Media coverage keeping their faces in public consciousness. Resources mobilized specifically to find them. The comparison seems straightforward until you realize that we're measuring 2 completely different games. Dexter succeeded because nobody was playing against him. His victims were people society had already given up on. His methods left minimal evidence. His cover life was so perfectly ordinary that it functioned as active camouflage. He had time to plan, resources from legitimate employment, and freedom to operate without anyone actively hunting him. Most wanted fugitives failed because the entire system activated against them. Their crimes were too public to ignore. Their faces became nationally recognizable. Their resources, however extensive, couldn't overcome coordinated federal pursuit. Whitey Bulger had 25 million and 16 years of experience evading capture. The FBI still found him. Eric Rudolph survived in the wilderness for 5 years. A rookie cop still caught him digging through the trash. Here's what makes this comparison unfair. If Dexter had committed crimes that put him on the most wanted list, public attacks, high-profile victims, media-generating violence, he would have been caught within months. His face would have been everywhere. His forensic expertise wouldn't have helped him once every cop in America was looking for him. His normal life cover would have collapsed the second his photo hit the news. But if most wanted fugitives had operated with Dexter's methodology, careful victim selection, meticulous planning, years of preparation, targeting people that nobody was looking for, they might have not made the list at all. Dexter's secret wasn't evading the FBI. It was making sure that they never even knew he existed. His genius was staying so far under the radar that nobody ever thought to look up. The fugitives on the most wanted list triggered the machine. Dexter understood how to avoid triggering it altogether. Calling that a fair fight would be a joke. They're playing 2 entirely different games. One group was running from the most powerful investigative force in the world, the other was walking past it every morning with a cup of coffee and a smile. Now that we've broken down Dexter's odds, it's time to examine the ice truck killer and why against the real FBI, the outcome wouldn't even be competitive. First up, we got theatrical displays versus pattern recognition systems. Brian Moser transformed murder into performance art, leaving elaborately staged body parts across Miami as if the entire city was his exhibition space. In the series, Brian Moser operated as the ice truck killer throughout season 1 of Dexter. He drained victims of blood completely, dismembered bodies with surgical precision, and displayed body parts in public locations across Miami. The killer refrigerated body parts to preserve them, used an ice truck to store and transport remains, and left victims posed in high-visibility public places to send messages. Each crime scene looked staged, deliberate, and designed to generate maximum attention. This approach guaranteed visibility. Brian treated murder like sculpture, with every display meant to provoke reaction. The theatrical nature meant media coverage, public panic, and intense law enforcement scrutiny. Every display created evidence. Every public location meant potential witnesses. His need for recognition drove him to operate in the most visible way possible. So how does that kind of public performance stand up against an agency that has spent decades building systems specifically designed to catch killers who operate this way? The FBI created VICAP in 1985 specifically to link serial crimes across jurisdictions by identifying signatures, patterns, and theatrical elements that killers think make them unique. According to official FBI documentation, the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program maintains a centralized database of violent crimes across the United States. The system was established in 1985 and is managed by the Behavioral Analysis Unit. VICAP collects detailed information about homicides, missing persons, unidentified victims, and sexual assaults. Investigators submit detailed standardized case reports documenting everything about crime scenes, including how bodies were positioned, what was done to victims, and any theatrical elements. When Jeffrey Dahmer was caught in 1991, FBI analysis revealed he posed victims' bodies, took photographs, and kept body parts as souvenirs. This organized killer pattern matched profiles the FBI has been developing since the 1970s. The FBI specifically tracks theatrical displays because organized killers cannot resist leaving signatures. VICAP would flag drained bodies with surgical precision appearing across Miami within days. The system looks for cooling off periods, geographic patterns, and signature behaviors. Brian's refrigeration, surgical blood drainage, and public displays would all register as signature elements. The FBI interviewed 36 incarcerated serial killers between 1972 and the mid-1980s to build their profiling database. When bodies start showing up, drained of blood, and arranged like art installations, VICAP lets analysts link unusual patterns quickly across jurisdictions, so investigators can connect the dots fast. So the winner in this case would be the FBI. Theatrical displays designed to shock versus a pattern recognition system built specifically to catch theatrical killers. The more elaborate Brian made his displays, the faster that VICAP would have identified him and activated federal resources. But before we dive into how the eye struck killer's victim selection compared to FBI investigation priorities, if you're enjoying the breakdown so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button. This analysis is just getting started. Next, we're going to talk about victim selection. The eye struck killer selected victims who would generate massive investigations, choosing people whose disappearances and deaths would create public panic and media frenzy. In Dexter Season 1, Brian victims included workers in the district, but his displays ensured that their death became front-page news. Unlike killers who choose marginalized victims to avoid attention, Brian's theatrical presentation turned every victim into a high-profile case. Brian abducted Tony Tucci and surgically amputated him while keeping him alive, then scattered stage clues around Miami that pointed police towards Tucci. Each body part became its own crime scene, requiring separate forensic teams and investigations. The dismembered body that he hid in Dexter's freezer, with nails painted to match the victims, showed his need to taunt investigators, especially Dexter. He escalated by targeting people connected to Dexter, making his final victim selection even more personal and risky. He chose victims and staging that made cases impossible to ignore. This victim selection strategy guaranteed maximum law enforcement response. When bodies start appearing in public locations, drained of blood, arranged like sculptures, police departments immediately allocate massive resources. Miami Metro Homicide formed a task force. Media coverage was constant. Public pressure demanded results. Every theatrical display increased the urgency to catch him, unlike serial killers who prey on marginalized victims that society might not actively search for. Brian's approach put him at the center of the biggest investigation Miami had seen in years. While Brian Moser was selecting victims designed to generate attention, what happens when those same theatrical displays trigger federal involvement and nationwide coordination? When serial murders become public spectacles that generate media coverage and public fear, the FBI classifies them as high-priority cases and deploys overwhelming investigative resources. According to FBI documentation, the Behavioral Analysis Unit provides investigative support to federal, state, local, and tribal law enforcement for complex violent crimes. The National Center for Analysis of Violent Crime was established in 1985 to provide instruction, research, and investigative support for exactly these types of cases. When serial murder generates significant media attention and public fear, the FBI can deploy rapid response teams to assist local jurisdictions. The Bureau provides criminal investigative analysis, interview strategy development, investigative strategy recommendations, and threat assessments. In real cases like Jeffrey Dahmer in 1991, once the scope of his crimes became clear, FBI forensic teams, analysts, and profilers all became involved in building the case. The FBI has jurisdiction over serial killings that cross state lines, but for even cases within a single jurisdiction, the Bureau provides support through VICAP analysis, behavioral profiling, and forensic laboratory services. The eye struck killer's theatrical displays would trigger immediate FBI involvement. Miami Metro would have contacted the Behavioral Analysis Unit within days of discovering the pattern. Federal forensic laboratories would process evidence. VICAP would search for similar cases nationwide. Geographic profiling would analyze where body parts were being dumped to predict where the killer likely lived or worked. Behavioral analysts would build a detailed profile. Organized killer, methodical, needs control, has medical or anatomical knowledge, craves recognition. The FBI would not wait for Brian Moser to make a mistake. They would actively narrow the suspect pool by analyzing who had access to refrigeration equipment, who had anatomical knowledge to drain blood surgically, who worked in medical fields or with cadavers, and who lived in the geographic area where body parts were being discovered. Every theatrical display would provide more data points for the profile, making the net tighter. Once again, in this case, the FBI would be the winner. Selecting high-profile victims who generate massive investigations versus an agency that specializes in those exact type of cases, Brian Moser's need for attention will put the FBI's full institutional weight directly on top of him within weeks of his first display. Generating attention through victim selection only mattered if investigators could not decode the messages he was sending. That brings us to the psychological game that Brian thought that he was winning. The ice truck killer used crime scenes to send symbolic messages, believing the references and hidden meanings would confuse investigators. Throughout Season 1, Brian left clues designed to communicate with Dexter. The Barbie doll represented the victim and crime scene in miniature. He ultimately led Dexter back to the shipping container where their mother was murdered, forcing Dexter to relive the trauma. His blood drainage created clean displays matching his vision of perfection. Each crime scene told a story to anyone who understood his perspective. Brian believes symbolism made him sophisticated, but every symbolic element provided profilers with psychological information. Symbolism reveals psychology. The cleanliness revealed obsessive control needs. Theatrical staging revealed narcissistic personality craving validation. What Brian thought was clever communication would give FBI analysts exactly what they needed. FBI profilers spent decades studying how serial killers communicate through crime scenes, developing frameworks to decode symbolism and predict behavior. According to FBI research, profilers analyze signature behaviors versus modus operandi to understand killer psychology. Signatures stay consistent because they fulfill psychological needs. The FBI documented this through interviews with 36 killers between 1972 and the mid-1980s. Agent Robert Ressler and John Douglas found organized killers pose victims, take souvenirs, and leave messages. When Dennis Rader sent letters as the BTK killer between 1974 and 2005, FBI analysts decoded his psychology from word choices, recognition needs, and binding methods. Brian's displays would provide profilers with psychological gold mines. Blood drainage suggests medical knowledge and possible blood-related trauma. Theatrical staging suggests narcissistic personality disorder. Communication through displays shows that he wants recognition from someone specific. The cleanliness marks him as highly intelligent and methodical. Refrigeration suggests medical fieldwork. The FBI would predict that he is a white male, 25 to 45, works in medical or scientific fields, lives alone, has childhood trauma history, and possesses above-average intelligence. So once again, the winner in this case would be the FBI. Crime scenes as symbolic communication versus profilers who spent 50 years decoding exactly that? Every symbol that Brian left revealed his psychology. But what do you think? Could the ice truck killer's symbolism have fooled FBI profilers? Or would they have decoded his psychology within days? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's move on to our next point: medical expertise versus professional databases. Brian Moser used professional anatomical knowledge to drain bodies and dismember them surgically, believing this expertise made him untraceable. In the series, Brian worked as a prosthetist, designing artificial limbs. This gave him anatomical knowledge, surgical techniques, and medical equipment access. Bodies were drained using methods suggesting circulatory system understanding. Dismemberment showed knowledge of joint structures. He used refrigeration to preserve tissue. Brian believed that medical knowledge gave him advantages, but that expertise created a signature pointing at medical training. The FBI would immediately flag that this killer had professional anatomical knowledge. So could Brian's prosthetist background stay hidden from an agency accessing every medical database nationwide? The FBI can access nationwide databases of medical professionals, including prosthetists, surgeons, and anyone licensed to work with human anatomy. According to investigative procedures, the FBI obtains records from state medical boards, licensing agencies, and educational institutions. When profiles suggest medical knowledge, investigators search databases for relevant training in geographic areas. Prosthetists require state licensing and formal education. The FBI could list every licensed prosthetist, surgical technician, or medical professional in Miami within days, and then cross-reference with age, living situation, and geographic proximity. Brian's specialized career would place him in the FBI's crosshairs. A killer displaying professional anatomical knowledge operating in Miami would trigger searches of medical professionals. Prosthetists are a small professional group. The FBI would list every prosthetist in South Florida, cross-reference men fitting the profile, then investigate anyone in the geographic zone where body parts appeared. One conversation with co-workers would reveal behavioral red flags. So once again, the winner is the FBI. Specialized knowledge versus nationwide databases tracking everyone with that same training? Brian's surgical precision pointed directly at his professional background. But if you thought that Brian Moser's medical expertise was an advantage, wait until you see what happens when he decided to get close to a homicide detective. Brian Moser infiltrated Deborah Morgan's life using a fake identity, believing personal relationships would shield him from investigation. In the series, Brian created a fake identity as Rudy Cooper and began dating Deborah Morgan, a Miami Metro homicide detective. He specifically targeted her because she was Dexter's sister and worked the ice truck killer case. The relationship gave him intelligence about the investigation, what evidence police had, and how close they were to catching him. His fake identity included work history and personal background that withstood casual scrutiny. This showed sophisticated social engineering. People rarely suspect romantic partners. By getting close to Deborah, he gained early warning if investigators started connecting the dots. Infiltrating a detective's life while committing murder she is investigating creates enormous risk. One background check would expose everything. And what happens when the detective's colleagues run standard verification on the new boyfriend? When serial killer cases escalate, FBI protocols require thorough background checks on anyone with unusual access to investigation details or law enforcement personnel. According to law enforcement procedures, when cases generate federal involvement, the FBI reviews individuals with that unusual access to investigation details. Background checks verify employment, education, addresses, financial records, and gaps in personal timelines. A fake identity requires fabricated employment records, false credentials, and constructed history. Each element can be verified through direct contact with claimed employers and schools. When Dennis Rader sent a floppy disk to media in February 2005, FBI computer forensics found deleted files with metadata showing that the disk was used at Christ Lutheran Church by a user named Dennis. Within 9 days, they verified his identity, obtained DNA from his daughter's medical records, and arrested him on February 25, 2005. Brian Rudy Cooper's identity would collapse under FBI scrutiny within days. A prosthetist who started dating a detective working the case at exactly the time murders began would trigger immediate suspicion. FBI agents would verify employment, contact previous employers, check educational records. A fabricated identity creates gaps investigators spot easily. Did Rudy Cooper pay taxes? Have credit history? Every fabricated detail creates a verification point where the lie falls apart. So once again, the winner is the FBI. Infiltrating a detective's life with fake identity versus federal background checks? Brian's boldest move was most doomed to failure. Even if Brian had somehow maintained his fake identity, there was still one problem that he could never solve. Every theatrical display he created left behind evidence he did not even know existed. The Ice Truck Killer created elaborate displays across Miami, each containing potential forensic evidence. In the series, Brian's displays created multiple crime scenes. Each body part was discovered in different locations. Plastic wrapping could contain fingerprints, DNA from skin cells, or manufacturing traces. Surgical tools used for dismemberment would leave distinctive marks. His ice truck and workspace could contain microscopic evidence including hair, fibers, and blood traces. Every display meant more opportunities to leave evidence. Brian believed careful preparation kept him clean, but forensic technology in the mid-2000s could detect microscopic traces that he would have never known he left. Touch DNA can be extracted from surfaces touched once. Luminol revealed blood traces after extensive cleaning. Every crime scene was a potential evidence source. Careful evidence management only goes so far when modern tech can extract DNA from skin cells left on surfaces. The FBI laboratory maintains advanced forensic technology capable of extracting DNA from trace amounts of biological material and linking suspects through microscopic evidence. According to FBI documentation, the FBI laboratory provides DNA analysis, trace evidence examination, fiber analysis, and tool mark identification. DNA can be generated from skin cells left on touched surfaces. Luminol testing reveals blood diluted thousands of times. The FBI maintains CODIS, storing DNA profiles from convicted offenders and crime scenes nationwide. In the BTK case, Dennis Rader sent a floppy disk to media in 2005. Computer forensics found deleted files showing the disk was used at Christ Lutheran Church by a user conveniently named Dennis. Combined with DNA from his daughter's medical records matching crime scene evidence, they arrested him on February 25, 2005. Every body part Brian displayed was a potential FBI laboratory case. DNA could be extracted from any biological material he touched. Fibers from clothing could be found on plastic. Tool marks could be matched to instruments. Blood traces from his workspace, and even microscopic amounts could place victims there. Microscopic traces of the same DNA would link scenes, and if his profile or a reference swap hits CODIS, that could confirm the ID. So once again, the winner here is the FBI. Careful evidence management versus technology extracting DNA from skin cells? Every display gave the FBI opportunities to collect microscopic evidence that Brian never knew he left. So, what's the verdict? Well, Brian Moser was theatrical, methodical, surgically precise. He transformed Miami into his art gallery, leaving elaborately staged displays that shocked the city and generated massive media coverage. He infiltrated a homicide detective's life. He believed his medical knowledge and artistic vision made him sophisticated. All of that works in the show partly because federal involvement stays muted, something unlikely in a comparable real case. The FBI is built to specifically catch theatrical killers like Brian Moser. VICAP would have flagged his pattern within days. Behavioral profilers would have identified him as highly organized with medical training and narcissistic traits. Database searches would have listed every licensed prosthetist in South Florida. Background checks would have exposed his fake identity the moment he dated a detective. Forensic laboratories would have extracted DNA from microscopic traces at multiple crime scenes. Geographic profiling would have narrowed his residence area based on where the body parts appeared. Brian's approach is surgical. The FBI's is systemic. Brian operated alone with theatrical displays meant to impress. The FBI operates as a coordinated machine with pattern recognition algorithms, nationwide databases, and forensic technology that finds evidence invisible to the naked eye. Brian thought that his symbolism and medical knowledge made him sophisticated. The FBI spent 50 years building profiles of organized killers with exactly those characteristics. If the eye-struck killer operated in the real world with FBI actively hunting him, he's unlikely to last 5 months. Once VICAP links cases, analysts profile, databases narrow the field, and lab tech pulls trace DNA, the clock runs out fast. Brian created elaborate displays because he craved recognition. That need for attention was always his downfall. The FBI would have given him exactly the attention he wanted, just not the way that he imagined. Every theatrical display would have provided more evidence. Every symbolic message would have revealed more psychology. Every victim would have tightened the net. One surgical serial killer with medical knowledge and a god complex versus the most powerful investigative force in the world with systems specifically designed to catch theatrical killers? The game would have been over before Brian even finished his first display. Now we circle back to Dexter and ask the real question: how long would it actually take the FBI to catch him? Dexter Morgan's operation within Miami-Dade County gave him a massive advantage that would delay FBI involvement by years, because the FBI cannot take over local murder investigations without being invited. Under Title 28 U.S. Code Section 540B, the FBI cannot formally assume control of serial killing investigations without a request from the head of law enforcement agency within jurisdictional authority. The FBI's role in serial murder cases evolved slowly through the 1900s. In the Bureau's earliest days, violent crimes only fell under FBI jurisdiction if they occurred on government property, the high seas, or certain Indian reservations. While the FBI could offer limited advisory or laboratory assistance, it could not take over a local police department's serial killer case without invitation. When Dexter committed his first kill, Nurse Mary, in his early adulthood, he was working with a single jurisdiction. Miami Metro Homicide Department had full authority. While the FBI had studied serial murder for decades, it was not until 2008 that it formally standardized the definition of serial murder as the unlawful killing of 2 or more victims by the same offender in separate events. Before the standardization, the threshold was commonly 3 victims. Dexter's disposal method created another barrier. He dismembered victims and dumped them in the Gulf Stream using biodegradable bags weighted with rocks. The Gulf Stream's powerful current carried bodies far from Miami. Most never surfaced. Those that did were decomposed beyond recognition or washed up in different jurisdictions, the Bahamas, Cuba, or further up the Florida coast. Operating in one city under one police department meant no cross-jurisdictional red flags. The FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, VICAP for short, was established in 1985 specifically to help law enforcement agencies identify serial killers operating across multiple jurisdictions. However, VICAP does not automatically identify serial killers. It depends entirely on local agencies recognizing potential linkages and submitting detailed case data. A Los Angeles detective named Pierce Brooks originally envisioned VICAP in the 1950s after realizing serial killers like Harvey Glatman could operate undetected because the approximately 16,000 separate law enforcement agencies nationwide couldn't communicate effectively. Ted Bundy famously exploited these jurisdictional gaps, moving from Washington to Oregon to Utah to Colorado to Florida. Each state investigated their murders independently. Dexter never needed to cross state lines. All of his crimes fell under Miami Metro's jurisdiction. No other agency was looking for similar cases. No VICAP alerts, no interagency task force. Just one police department investigating separate, seemingly unrelating missing persons cases with no bodies. FBI involvement wouldn't begin for years, possibly decades, because Dexter never triggered the primary mechanism that alerts federal authorities to serial killers, multiple jurisdictions with similar unsolved homicides. Before we continue, if you're finding this breakdown fascinating, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. But staying in one jurisdiction was only half of Dexter's protection. The other half? Making sure nobody could prove a crime had even occurred. Without bodies, there's no murder investigation. Without murder investigations, there's no pattern. And without a pattern, the FBI stays in Quantico. Even if Miami Metro suspected a serial killer was operating, they couldn't request FBI assistance without bodies, physical evidence, or a clear pattern linking disappearances to a single perpetrator. Between his early adulthood in 2006, Dexter had killed dozens of people before the pilot episode of the series. Based on on-screen evidence and character dialogue, estimates place Dexter's pre-series victim count in the dozens. The show never provides an exact figure though. We know from the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation in Season 2 that 18 bodies washed ashore, and Dexter's blood slide collection represented dozens of victims, though the series never confirms that each slide corresponds to a unique kill. The Dexter Wiki documents many early victims: Alex Timmons, the first blood slide in mid-1990s, Gene Marshall, Coleman and Max Lindquist from 2000, Larry Muir, also 2000, Anthony Rodrigo, 2002, Cindy Landon, 2004, and other named victims whose blood slides appeared on FBI whiteboards during Season 2's investigation. But here's the critical fact: none of these people were connected as victims of the same killer until Season 2, Episode 1, when those 18 bodies washed up on shore over several weeks. Before that, they were missing person cases. No pattern, no bodies, no crime scenes, no evidence. The FBI's 2008 report, Serial Murder: Multidisciplinary Perspective for Investigators, states that identifying murders as the work of a serial killer is the first challenge an investigation faces, especially if victims come from marginalized or high-risk populations. The report emphasizes that cases are normally linked through forensic or behavioral evidence. Without bodies, there's nothing to link. Dexter selected victims carefully. Many were criminals already living off the grid. When these people disappeared, their absence didn't trigger intensive investigations. A drug dealer vanishes, could be hiding from rivals. A murderer who beat their court case disappears, maybe they left town. Dexter's victim selection meant low-profile disappearances that didn't generate massive search efforts or media attention. Consider the documented victims. Mike Donovan was a convicted murderer who had killed a boy. Jamie Jaworski killed his wife. Matt Chambers was a suspected serial killer. These weren't upstanding citizens whose disappearances would generate headlines. They were criminals, predators, people living in the shadows. When they vanished, few people cared enough to push for answers. Some families might have filed missing person reports, but those reports went into a system handling thousands of cases annually. The Gulf Stream disposal was brilliant from an investigation standpoint. The Gulf Stream's strong currents would rapidly transport remains far from Miami, often preventing recovery and accelerating decomposition. The salt water, marine life, and time destroyed evidence systematically. Within weeks, even dental identification became difficult. Fingerprints were impossible, and DNA degraded. The plastic bags Dexter used were biodegradable. They'd break down over time, releasing the dismembered remains to scatter across the ocean floor or wash up as unidentified pieces on distant shores. The rocks he used as weights would eventually separate as the plastic deteriorated. Marine life would scatter remains further. The methodology was forensically sound for a killer trying to avoid detection. Miami Metro couldn't request FBI help because they didn't know they needed it. They had missing person cases, not connected homicides. VICAP analysts at the FBI's Critical Incident Response Group in Quantico wouldn't flag anything because nothing was being entered as linked crimes. Local detectives investigating separate disappearances had no reason to think one person was responsible. The FBI's VICAP database only helps when agencies recognize patterns and submit cases. Miami Metro had no pattern to recognize, just individual missing person reports scattered across 15 years, involving people from different demographics, different parts of the city, with seemingly nothing connecting them except that they all committed serious crimes that went unpublished. The FBI wouldn't be alerted or involved in any capacity until bodies were discovered and forensically linked to the same offender. This would take 15 years from Dexter's first kill. For 15 years, Dexter operated in perfect obscurity. No bodies, no connections, no federal involvement. Then something happened that Dexter couldn't control. The ocean gave back what he'd taken. And when those bodies started washing ashore in 2007, everything changed. The FBI only became involved in catching Dexter after 18 bodies washed ashore in Season 2, establishing an undeniable pattern that required federal assistance. Season 2, Episode 1, It's Alive, showed the first bodies from the Bay Harbor Butcher washing up on Miami beaches. The bodies were dismembered, wrapped in plastic, and clearly showed the same methodology. FBI Special Agent Frank Lundy arrived in Season 2, Episode 2 to assist Miami Metro with the investigation. Lundy was a veteran serial killer investigator who recognized the pattern immediately. The Bay Harbor Butcher case had distinctive characteristics. All victims were found in biodegradable plastic bags. All were dismembered in the same methodical pattern. All showed evidence of being sedated with M99, an animal tranquilizer, and all had a small blood sample removed from the right cheek. These signature elements are exactly what VICAP was designed to identify, behavioral patterns indicating a single offender. During the investigation, the FBI forensic analysts officially identified 18 confirmed victims, though investigators believed the true number was higher. Agent Lundy's team created detailed victim profiles, established timelines, and used behavioral analysis to predict the killer's characteristics. The FBI's involvement brought resources Miami Metro couldn't provide alone: national database access, behavioral profiling expertise, and specialized forensic capabilities. This represents the exact scenario the FBI was designed to handle. The Violent Criminal Apprehension Program maintains a nationwide repository containing approximately 85,000 violent crimes. VICAP crime analysts examine homicides, sexual assaults, missing persons, and unidentified bodies to identify potential similarities. The program works by determining connections between cases based on modus operandi, victimology, physical evidence, suspect description, and suspect behavior. The Bay Harbor butcher bodies triggered every VICAP red flag. Multiple victims discovered in the same area over a short period, identical disposal methods, clear signature behavior. This was a textbook case for FBI assistance. Local law enforcement agencies can submit cases to VICAP through a web-based system called VICAP Web, which collects detailed crime scene descriptions, victim and offender descriptive data, laboratory reports, criminal history records, court records, news media references, and crime scene photographs. The FBI also brought its Behavioral Analysis Unit into play. BAU analysts from the National Center for the Analysis of Violent Crime provided criminal investigative analysis, examining the offender's motives, victim selection, level of sophistication, and behavioral patterns. They determined the killer was highly organized, had forensic knowledge, potentially worked in law enforcement, and operated with extreme precision. The FBI's behavioral profilers used decades of research in a serial killer psychology, studying patterns from hundreds of solved cases to build profiles of unknown offenders. Agent Lundy represented the FBI's best. His experience with serial homicide investigations meant that he understood the psychological makeup of killers like Dexter. He knew to look for someone with routine access to crime scenes, someone who could blend into investigations, someone with forensic awareness. The profile was narrowing correctly. In Season 2, Episode 8, Morning Comes, Lundy specifically noted that the killer had knowledge of law enforcement procedures and likely worked in forensics or criminal justice. Under normal circumstances, a case with these characteristics would have been solved relatively quickly. The FBI's involvement meant massive resources, forensic teams from the FBI Laboratory Division in Quantico, behavioral profilers trained in criminal psychology, database analysts running queries through CODIS and VICAP, and interagency coordination bringing together Miami Metro, the Coast Guard, and surrounding jurisdictions. The investigation had momentum. They were closing in on the truth, but Dexter had one advantage the FBI didn't account for. He was part of the investigation team, working as Miami Metro's blood spatter analyst on the very case designed to catch him. He attended briefings, heard theories, saw evidence, and knew exactly how close they were getting. He could subtly redirect attention, volunteer for assignments that let him control evidence, and maintain his cover by being helpful and visible. The FBI profiles organized killers versus disorganized killers. Dexter was organized to an extreme degree because he had inside information about the hunt. The FBI became involved after approximately 15 years and dozens of victims, triggered only when physical evidence, the bodies, established an undeniable pattern. Under normal circumstances, FBI involvement could have narrowed the suspect pool within months and led to identification with 1 to 2 years, depending on evidence flow. But Dexter's inside position as a forensic analyst gave him access to investigation details, evidence handling, and the ability to subtly misdirect the inquiry. Before we move on to the final phase, drop a comment down below. If Dexter didn't work for Miami Metro, how much faster would the FBI caught him? Drop your theories. The FBI had the resources, they had the expertise, they had the profile, but catching a serial killer requires one thing above all else: physical evidence. And that evidence was about to fall into someone's hands, just not the FBI's. The FBI investigation ultimately failed because the critical evidence, Dexter's blood slide collection, was discovered internally by Sergeant James Dokes rather than through FBI investigative procedures, and this evidence was destroyed before federal agents could analyze it. Season 2, Episode 8, Morning Comes, showed Sergeant Dokes discovering Dexter's blood slide collection box. Dokes, a former Army Ranger with extensive combat and intelligence training, had suspected Dexter from the pilot episode. His training gave him instincts that recognized danger. He followed Dexter using a GPS tracker and caught him disposing of body parts at an Everglades cabin in Season 2, Episode 9. The blood slide box contained physical evidence from dozens of kills. The blood slides would not identify Dexter through CODIS. Instead, they would allow the FBI to identify victims, establish links between cases, and prove a single offender was responsible, which would then allow investigators to focus on suspects with access and opportunity. CODIS was established by the FBI in 1994 through the DNA Identification Act. As of 2018, the National DNA Index System contained over 13 million offender profiles, 3 million arrestee profiles, and 864,000 forensic profiles. CODIS has assisted in more than 409,000 investigations. Those 45 blood slides, once entered in the CODIS, would have created matches. Each match would link to a case file. The pattern would become undeniable. Dexter would be identified within days, but the evidence never reached the FBI. Lila West killed Dokes by exploding the cabin where he was being held in Season 2, Episode 12. The explosion destroyed the physical evidence and conveniently provided a dead suspect, Dokes, who couldn't defend himself. The FBI investigation concluded with Dokes falsely identified as a Bay Harbor butcher. Case closed. This represents a critical failing in the FBI's investigative process, though through no fault of the Bureau. Serial killer investigations depend on evidence making it from the field to the laboratory to the database. The FBI provides free analytical services to law enforcement agencies nationwide through VICAP, CODIS, and their forensic laboratories, but they can only analyze evidence that's submitted. CODIS operates on multiple levels: local DNA index systems, LDIS, at local crime laboratories, state DNA index systems, SDIS, at state laboratories, and the National DNA Index System, NDIS, at the FBI. When a blood sample is entered at the local level, it can be searched against the national database. Each of Dexter's blood slides could have been tested and compared against missing person profiles where families had provided DNA samples for comparison, or against unidentified bodies from unsolved cases. The blood slides wouldn't directly identify Dexter as the killer, but they would establish victim identities and prove the murders were connected, narrowing the investigation to suspects with forensic knowledge and access to the victims. The power of CODIS comes from its scale. By 2018, the system had assisted in more than 409,000 investigations. It's designed to link cases that seem unrelated and help identify victims whose bodies were never found or remain unidentified. Dokes found the smoking gun evidence outside official channels. He was conducting an unauthorized investigation based on personal suspicion. When he confronted Dexter, the confrontation occurred away from oversight or backup. The evidence was never properly documented, photographed, or secured in an evidence locker. No chain of custody, no official report, no FBI notification. In proper criminal procedure, evidence must follow strict protocols: discovery, documentation, collection, preservation, and analysis. Each step creates a record. Each transfer requires signatures. The chain of custody ensures evidence integrity and admissibility in court. Dokes bypassed all of this. He found the box, took it, and used it to confront the suspect directly, a violation of every investigative protocol. While the blood slides alone might have faced admissibility challenges, they would have irreversibly exposed Dexter as the killer and redirected the entire investigation. The FBI's specialized resources, behavioral analysts, forensic labs, database access, were world-class, but they couldn't catch Dexter without evidence. Agent Lundy came close. His behavioral profile was accurate. The killer was forensically aware, possibly in law enforcement, highly intelligent, and operating with methodical precision. But profile accuracy doesn't equal identification without physical proof. You can't arrest someone based on fitting a psychological profile. You need physical evidence linking them to crimes. The blood slides were that evidence. The FBI investigation was progressing correctly using established protocols. They needed 18 bodies to recognize the pattern, requested local law enforcement invitation to participate, deployed resources appropriately, and were building towards identification. Under normal circumstances, the timeline from FBI involvement to potential capture could have been 6 months to 2 years, but the internal discovery and destruction of evidence by someone outside the official investigation prevented what could have been a successful federal case. So we established how long it took the FBI to get involved with Dexter's actual operations. But what if things had been different? What if Dexter made one crucial mistake that serial killers throughout history have made: crossing state lines? If Dexter had operated across state lines instead of staying in Miami, the FBI would have been involved after just 3 to 5 kills and could have caught him within 1 to 2 years. The FBI's Highway Serial Killing Initiative demonstrated this principle. Launched in 2004, the initiative focused on serial killers who targeted victims along interstate highways, particularly long-haul truck drivers who killed prostitutes. The program used VICAP to create extensive timelines of suspects and develop victim matrices comparing information. By 2017, the initiative had identified more than 400 suspects and 700 victims. The success came from one key factor: different jurisdictions entering similar cases into VICAP. A prostitute murdered in Tennessee, another in Arkansas, a third in Texas. Each jurisdiction entered their case. VICAP analysts identified the pattern. The FBI coordinated between agencies. Suspects were identified and apprehended. According to the FBI's 2008 serial murder report, cases crossing multiple jurisdictions face significant challenges because of America's fragmented law enforcement system with approximately 16,000 separate agencies. But this fragmentation also creates opportunities for detection. Multiple agencies investigating similar crimes increases the chance that someone will notice the pattern and report it to VICAP. Dexter's single jurisdiction operation was his greatest protection. If he had killed a criminal in Miami, then another in Fort Lauderdale, then Tampa, then Jacksonville, the FBI would have been notified immediately. Each city's homicide department would have entered unsolved cases into VICAP. The signature elements, plastic wrapping, dismemberment pattern, sedation method, blood sample removal, would have flagged as matches. VICAP crime analysts monitor the database specifically looking for these connections. Their job is to find cases in different jurisdictions that might be linked. When they identify potential matches, they contact the respective agencies and facilitate information sharing. The FBI can then be requested to assist, bringing federal resources to bear. Multi-jurisdictional cases also generate more media attention. A serial killer crossing state lines makes national news. Public pressure accelerates investigations. The FBI's ability to work across all 50 states becomes essential. Resources multiply. The net tightens faster. Real serial killers like Ted Bundy and Richard Ramirez were caught partly because they crossed jurisdictions and created enough of a pattern that multiple agencies recognized they were hunting the same person. The FBI coordinated the investigations and provided support that led to identification and capture. Cross-jurisdictional operation would have significantly reduced Dexter's operational lifespan. 3 to 5 bodies in different Florida cities would have likely triggered VICAP alerts within 6 months to a year. FBI involvement would follow. Behavioral profiles, forensic analysts, and interagency coordination could have identified Dexter as a person of interest within 1 to 2 years. His position at Miami Metro would have made him a suspect rather than a shield, because he'd have access to information from multiple jurisdictions that an outsider wouldn't have. Now, let's put it all together. The complete timeline, from that first kill in 1991 to the moment federal agents would have walked through Miami Metro's doors with an arrest warrant. Here's exactly how long it would have taken the FBI to catch Dexter Morgan. Under realistic FBI investigation protocols, accounting for Dexter's advantages and methods, the complete timeline from first kill to federal capture would have involved dozens of victims over 15 to 17 years, culminating in potential arrest within 1 to 2 years of FBI involvement had the investigation not been compromised by internal interference. Let's map the actual chronological progression. From 1991 to 2006, 15 years, dozens of kills. This is the local jurisdiction phase. Miami Metro handled disappearances as unconnected missing person cases. No pattern recognition, no FBI involvement. Dexter operated freely. 2006, Season 2, 18 bodies discovered. Bodies washed ashore, establishing Bay Harbor Butcher pattern. FBI requested by Miami Metro, and Special Agent Frank Lundy deployed with full resources. 2007, Season 2, Episodes 1 through 12, the investigation period. FBI behavioral analysis, forensic examination, database queries, victim identification, and pattern establishment. The investigation narrowing towards suspects within Miami Metro. Season 2, Episode 8, the mid-investigation. Dokes discovers blood slide evidence. This represents the point where FBI investigation could have succeeded had the evidence been properly processed. Season 2, Episode 12, the investigation conclusion. The evidence was destroyed. Dokes framed posthumously as the Bay Harbor Butcher, and the FBI investigation concludes incorrectly. The FBI involvement timeline spans Season 2's episodes. In that time, they correctly profiled the killer's characteristics, narrowed suspects as someone inside law enforcement with forensic knowledge, and were building towards identification when the case was artificially resolved. This timeline matches documented serial killer investigations. The FBI's average time from involvement to resolution in active serial murder cases varies, but cases with strong enough physical evidence and clear patterns can resolve within 12 to 18 months, though some take much longer. The Green River Killer investigation took 19 years, but that was a cold case that went dormant. Active investigations with FBI resources and modern forensic technology typically move faster. Dexter's case had every element needed for resolution: clear signature, forensic evidence, body recovery, suspect pool narrowing, law enforcement or forensics, and victimology establishing motive, criminals escaping justice. The FBI had all the puzzle pieces. They needed the final evidence, the blood slides, to complete the picture. The key variable was Dexter's internal position. Most serial killers don't work for the police department investigating them. This created a unique situation where the suspect could monitor investigation process, access evidence, and subtly misdirect attention. It was the equivalent of the Green River killing being on the task force hunting himself, a scenario that actually happened with Dennis Rader, the BTK killer who worked in compliance and code enforcement and had contact with police, though he wasn't directly investigating his own crimes. So the complete timeline was 15 years and dozens of victims before FBI involvement, 1 to 2 years from FBI involvement to potential identification, depending on evidence availability, leading us to a total timeline of approximately 16 to 17 years for potential capture, assuming no interference. The interference in this case, Dokes' unauthorized discovery and subsequent death, extended Dexter's operational timeline by an additional 7 years and many additional victims before being ultimately caught in Dexter New Blood. From first kill to potential federal capture, Dexter Morgan had a window of approximately 15 to 17 years, during which he killed dozens of victims before the FBI's methodical investigation would have closed in. Proof that operating within a single jurisdiction while disposing of bodies in the ocean created conditions to evade federal detection for over a decade. Next, we ask another crucial question. How fast could Dexter clear the FBI's most wanted list? Dexter Morgan's skill set makes him uniquely effective at hunting FBI fugitives, potentially more effective than the federal agents themselves. 12 years as Miami Metro's blood spatter analyst gave him direct access to police databases, forensic equipment, and case files. Dokes repeatedly implied Dexter was capable of far more than his credentials suggested, questioning why someone with apparent medical training would settle for forensics work. Beyond the lab, he displays combat skills far beyond standard police training. His methodology is meticulous. M99 to subdue victims, obtained using the alias Patrick Bateman MD, plastic wrap kill rooms leaving no forensic trace, dismembered remains in weighted bags dumped offshore where recovery becomes unlikely. The Code of Harry requires absolute certainty of guilt and that Dexter never gets caught. The 10 most wanted list wouldn't replace the code, it would function as a high confidence starting filter, letting him skip discovery and move straight to verification. These cases carry extensive investigative histories, public documentation, and federal indictment. Evidence Dexter rarely starts with. The overlap between the FBI's selection criteria and Dexter's is almost perfect. Since 1950, 537 fugitives have appeared on the list, 500 captured or located, a 93 success rate, though 31% came from public tips rather than investigative work. These fugitives have already been investigated, charged, and publicly identified, their crimes documented, their patterns established, their faces known. For a hunter who spends weeks researching targets before striking, the FBI has essentially done his homework for him. The only question, how long would each target take? Before we continue, if you're finding this breakdown fascinating, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Having the right tools means nothing if you can't find your target. Some of these fugitives evaded the most sophisticated intelligence apparatus on Earth for decades. Let's see how Dexter would approach the Bureau's most elusive prey. Starting with Target 1, James Earl Ray, the assassin who couldn't stay hidden. James Earl Ray, the assassin of Martin Luther King Jr., would have been one of Dexter's fastest captures due to his predictable behavior patterns and reliance on third parties. Ray escaped from the Missouri State Penitentiary on April 23, 1967 by hiding in a box of bread in the back of a delivery truck. He had assistance from at least one fellow inmate in executing his escape. After assassinating Dr. King on April 4, 1968, Ray fled to Canada, then London, then Lisbon, then back to London, all within 2 months. The FBI investigation became the largest in Bureau history at that time, with thousands of agents pursuing leads. Yet Ray's capture came almost accidentally. He was detained at Heathrow while traveling under false Canadian identities already flagged by authorities. British police subsequently identified Ray's true identity during interrogation. Ray demonstrated several vulnerabilities. He used multiple aliases poorly, relied on family members for assistance after escaping prison, needed to cross international borders, and required external financial support. His brothers, Jerry and John, provided assistance following his escape, making them potential intelligence sources. Ray visited his brother John in the St. Louis area twice shortly after his prison escape. Dexter excels at tracking individuals who need external support systems. Throughout the series, he repeatedly exploited targets' relationships following their routines, monitoring their contacts, waiting for moments of vulnerability. Ray needed money, forged documents, transportation, and eventually airplane tickets. Each transaction left traces. Dexter wouldn't need to deploy thousands of agents across multiple countries. He would focus on Ray's weaknesses, his brother's location in the St. Louis area, his documented interest in immigrating to Rhodesia, his need for false identity documents. He stalked the Trinity Killer across multiple episodes, studying patterns before striking. Once Ray became the subject of the largest manhunt in US history, the same dependencies that eventually exposed him would have made him vulnerable far earlier to a focused hunter. Ray's dependence on external support and his need for travel made him vulnerable to someone willing to wait. The FBI caught Ray in 65 days. Dexter, unburdened by jurisdictional limitations and bureaucratic protocols, could have matched or beaten that timeline, a few weeks at most. Ray was a small-time crook who got lucky with timing and geography. He wasn't built for long-term invasion. Dexter would have recognized that immediately. Target 2, Ted Bundy, when predators become prey. Ted Bundy presents a unique challenge because he himself was an organized, intelligent killer, the first target on this list who had recognized Dexter as a threat. Bundy escaped from custody twice. The first escape came in June of 1977, when he jumped from a second-story courthouse window in Aspen, Colorado. He was recaptured 5 days later. The second escape occurred on New Year's Eve in 1977, when he slipped through an opening in the ceiling of his jail cell. The FBI added Bundy to their 10 most wanted fugitives list on February 10, 1978. Bundy evaded capture for 46 days after his second escape. During this period, he murdered 2 women at a Florida State University sorority house, attacked another FSU student who survived, and killed a 12-year-old girl. His final capture came when a Pensacola police officer pulled him over for driving erratically in a stolen vehicle. Bundy later expressed regret at being captured rather than killed during the arrest. Bundy confided in Special Agent William Hagmeyer of the FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit about his methods. He described sexual assault as fulfilling his need to totally possess his victims. Murder became part of the adventure. He stated that the ultimate possession was, in fact, the taking of the life, and the physical possession of the remains. Bundy represents Dexter's most psychologically complex target. Both men are organized killers who charm their way into victims' trust. Both understand forensic investigation. Both maintain surface-level social relationships to appear normal. The difference is that Dexter operates with a code, while Bundy operated purely on compulsion. Dexter tracked the eye-struck killer, his own brother, by understanding how another killer thinks. With Bundy, Dexter would recognize the compulsion driving him back to crime scenes, back to bodies, back to hunting grounds. Bundy confessed to revisiting victims' bodies for grooming and sexual contact until decomposition made further interaction impossible. This compulsion created patterns. After escaping custody, Bundy traveled by train from Chicago to Ann Arbor, then stole a car and drove to Atlanta, then took a bus to Tallahassee. He rented a room near Florida State University. He later told investigators he initially resolved to find legitimate employment and refrain from criminal activity, knowing he could remain free indefinitely as long as he didn't attract police attention. He couldn't stop himself. His job application at the construction site had to be abandoned when he asked to produce identification. Dexter would position himself in Bundy's hunting ground and wait. Bundy's compulsion to kill young women near universities gave him a geographic profile. His need to return to bodies gave him temporal patterns. His inability to hold legitimate employment kept him mobile and visible. Dexter had killed other serial killers before. The Trinity Killer, the Skinner, the Doomsday Killer. He knows how they think because part of him shares their compulsions. Bundy's compulsions didn't cause his capture alone, but they dramatically narrowed the window in which he could remain invisible. The FBI caught him through a routine traffic stop. Dexter would have caught him through predator instinct. A few weeks, maybe less. Drop a comment below. Who do you think would win in a direct confrontation between Dexter and Bundy? I want to hear your theories. Bundy was dangerous because he understood how to hunt. Dexter is dangerous because he understands how hunters think. That psychological edge would determine the outcome. Target 3. Eric Rudolph, the Survivalist Challenge. Eric Rudolph, the Olympic Park bomber, represents Dexter's most difficult domestic target due to his survival skills and ability to live completely off the grid. Rudolph planted a bomb at the Centennial Olympic Park during the 1996 Summer Olympics, killing 1 spectator and injuring more than 100 others. Over the next 2 years, he placed 3 more bombs, killing a police officer and injuring several others. The FBI placed Rudolph on the 10 most wanted fugitives list on May 5, 1998, and offered a $1 million reward for information leading to his arrest. Rudolph evaded capture for 5 years by living in the Appalachian wilderness of western North Carolina. He survived through foraging, theft, and nighttime supply raids. He had multiple hiding places throughout the Nantahala National Forest, including caves and campsites positioned between trails where searchers were unlikely to look. The FBI scoured the forest with bloodhounds, electronic motion detectors, heat-seeking helicopters, and cameras at listening posts. None of it worked. Rudolph was finally captured on May 31, 2003, when a 21-year-old rookie police officer named Jeff Postal spotted him digging through a trash can behind a grocery store at 3 a.m. The officer who arrested him had no idea he had just captured one of the country's most sought-after fugitives. Rudolph had 55-gallon barrels buried near his campsite, filled with grain, soy, and oats stolen from a granary 4 miles away. He made nighttime raids for supplies and retreated to positions where searchers won't look. Rudolph breaks Dexter's typical hunting pattern. Most of Dexter's targets live in urban environments with routines, relationships, and dependencies that created vulnerabilities. Rudolph eliminated all of those. No family contact, no financial transactions, no communication. Dexter's forensic skills became less relevant in wilderness pursuit. His M99 tranquilizer requires proximity that wilderness terrain makes nearly impossible to achieve. But Dexter can adapt to environments outside of Miami. In New Blood, he operated successfully in Iron Lake, New York, a rural community with harsh winters. He switched his disposal method from ocean dumping to cremation. He adapted his hunting methods to a smaller population. Dexter's best approach would mirror the FBI's eventual success: resource denial. Rudolph was caught because he needed food. Dexter could monitor the supply chains Rudolph depended on: grocery stores, granaries, dumpsters. The wilderness kept Rudolph safe, but it also kept him hungry. Eric Rudolph would be Dexter's longest hunt, potentially several months of observation and positioning. The capture would likely come during a supply run rather than in the wilderness. Rudolph's survival skills prolonged his freedom, but his biological needs created inevitable exposure points. Rudolph survived by disappearing from civilization entirely. Our next target took the opposite approach. He hid in plain sight for 16 years while the FBI searched the wrong continents. And the reason he stayed free for so long? He had someone on the inside. James Whitey Bulger presents a unique problem because his relationships with the FBI itself allowed him to evade capture, a corruption that Dexter's methods could bypass entirely. Bulger ran South Boston's Winter Hill Gang and was wanted for his role in 19 murders. He evaded capture for 16 years after fleeing Boston in December 1994. The reason for his successful escape was simple. FBI agent John Cannoli, who came from the same South Boston housing project as Bulger, tipped him off about a pending RICO indictment. Bulger had served as an FBI informant for more than 15 years, providing information about rival Italian mafia operations. In exchange, the FBI overlooked gambling, drugs, and even homicide to protect their source. A $2 million reward was offered for information leading to his capture, second only to Osama bin Laden's reward on the FBI's most wanted list. The FBI received thousands of tips over 16 years. In reality, Bulger never left the country. He lived in a rent-controlled apartment in Santa Monica, California, with his girlfriend Catherine Grieg under the alias Charlie and Carol Gasco. Bulger was captured on June 22, 2011, after the FBI launched a publicity campaign focusing on Greg rather than Bulger. The campaign highlighted Greg's cosmetic surgeries and frequent visits to beauty salons. A public tip following the campaign led authorities to the apartment. Agents found more than $800,000 in cash, over 30 firearms, and false identification inside. Bulger's case reveals why Dexter might succeed where the FBI failed for so long: no internal corruption to protect the target. Cannoli's relationship with Bulger meant that standard FBI channels couldn't be trusted. Dexter operates entirely outside that system. Dexter would approach Bulger through the associates and loved ones who create exposure. Bulger couldn't abandon Greg. That relationship anchored him to predictable patterns: beauty salons, dental offices, medical appointments. The FBI eventually caught Bulger by targeting Greg. Dexter would have recognized that vulnerability from the start. Dexter has operated around organized crime before. He killed Viktor Baskov, a member of the Koshka Brotherhood, a Ukrainian organized crime syndicate. He navigated Miami's criminal underworld without triggering retaliation because he understood how these organizations work. Based on Greg's established patterns, Dexter could have found Bulger within months. The FBI's inside corruption created blind spots that Dexter doesn't share. Bulger thought he was untouchable because he knew how federal investigations work. He had no defense against a hunter operating completely outside that system. 4 targets down, each one catchable through observation, pattern recognition, and Dexter's willingness to operate outside institutional constraints. But our final target presents something entirely different: a fugitive so protected by geography, politics, and military-grade security that even Dexter's considerable skills hit a hard boundary. Osama bin Laden represents a target that falls completely outside Dexter's operational capabilities, not because of skill limitations, but because of geographic, political, and logistical barriers that no individual can overcome. Bin Laden was added to the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list following the 1998 US embassy bombings in Africa. After the September 11 attacks, he became the most wanted terrorist in the world. The CIA searched for bin Laden for nearly 10 years before locating him in Abbottabad, Pakistan. The compound where bin Laden hid featured extensive security measures: 12 to 18-foot concrete walls topped with barbed wire, double entry gates, opaque windows, no internet or telephone communications, and all trash burned rather than collected. He lived there for approximately 5 to 6 years with several wives, children, and supporters. The breakthrough came from tracking his courier, Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti. The CIA rented a home near the compound and conducted surveillance for months. On May 2, 2011, 24 members of SEAL Team 6 arrived by helicopter, breached the compound walls using explosives, and killed bin Laden on the 3rd floor. Bin Laden falls outside the code of Harry for practical rather than ethical reasons. Harry designed the code for a blood spatter analyst operating in Miami, someone who could research targets through police databases, surveil them in familiar and urban environments, and dispose of bodies using established methods. None of that applies to a target hiding in a foreign country behind military-grade security. Dexter has no method for infiltrating Pakistani territory. He has no intelligence network to identify courier patterns. Even if he could reach bin Laden, he has no extraction plan for a hostile foreign country. The code requires certainty of guilt. With bin Laden, the evidence was overwhelming. The 9/11 attacks killed nearly 3,000 people. The code would absolutely permit this kill. The logistics simply don't. Osama bin Laden represents the hard limit of Dexter's capabilities. No timeline exists because the operation falls completely outside its operational parameters. Some targets require nation-state resources that no individual possesses, regardless of skill level. Dexter is a precision instrument designed for a specific purpose. Bin Laden required a sledgehammer that only the US military could wield. Given realistic operational constraints and canonical abilities, Dexter could clear 4 of 5 high-profile FBI most wanted fugitives, with one target falling outside his capabilities entirely. Here are the projected timelines. James Earl Ray would take a few weeks. His family dependence, poor operational security, and predictable movement patterns would get him caught. The FBI caught him in 65 days through accidental detection. Dexter could match or improve that through focused surveillance. Ted Bundy would take a few weeks, possibly less. His compulsive behavior, geographic predictability near universities, and his inability to control his hunting urges would get him caught. The FBI added him to the most wanted list on February 10, 1978, and he was caught February 15, 5 days later, through a routine traffic stop. His compulsions dramatically narrowed his window of invisibility. Next is Eric Rudolph, which would take several months. His downfall was the needs for supplies and eventual exposure during resource acquisition. The FBI searched for 5 years. Dexter's focused approach and lack of bureaucratic constraints could reduce that substantially. Whitey Bulger would take a few months. The romantic attachment to Catherine Gregg and predictable lifestyle patterns would be his downfall. The FBI searched for 16 years while compromised from within. Dexter's independence from that corrupted system eliminates Bulger's primary advantage. And as we mentioned for Osama bin Laden, there is no viable timeline. Geographic, political, and logistical barriers exceed individual operational capacity regardless of skill level. The combined timeline for achievable targets ranges from approximately 20 to 30 months under optimal conditions. This assumes Dexter pursues targets sequentially rather than simultaneously, consistent with his established methodology of focusing completely on one target before moving to the next. Dexter can sustain extended hunts. The Trinity Killer investigation spanned an entire season. The Bay Harbor Butcher investigation required him to manipulate evidence and redirect attention for months. His willingness to wait is not a weakness. It is a defining characteristic that separates him from disorganized killers who make impulsive mistakes. Each target on this list was eventually captured or killed. Ray was detained under flagged aliases. Bundy was caught through a traffic violation. Rudolph was caught during a supply run. Bulger was caught through a public tip about his girlfriend. Bin Laden was caught through a decade of intelligence work culminating in a military operation. Every fugitive eventually creates an opening. Dexter's edge comes from exploiting those openings faster than bureaucracies built around procedure rather than speed. This isn't a head-to-head comparison between Dexter and the FBI. His effectiveness comes from singular focus, not scale. Based on the documented vulnerabilities and historical capture circumstances examined here, Dexter could realistically clear 4 to 5 targets with a combined timeline measured in a couple years rather than the decades some of these manhunts actually required. The one target beyond his reach, bin Laden, represents not a failure of the code, but an acknowledgement of operational scope. Harry designed Dexter to hunt criminals who slipped through the American justice system. International terrorists hiding behind foreign governments require different solutions. From a methodical hunter using forensic expertise to a one-man justice system capable of clearing the FBI's most dangerous list, Dexter Morgan's skills translate directly to fugitive hunting at the highest levels, with realistic limitations only at the point where individual capacity meets nation-state requirements. Finally, we break down why Dexter's mistakes against the real-life FBI wouldn't even be close. In this video, we're going to examine Dexter's most dangerous close calls and ask one critical question. Would the FBI's behavioral analysis unit have let him walk away? The answer might surprise you, or it might confirm what you suspected all along. Let's dive into the first thing, which is the blood slide that should have ended everything. Evidence handling versus the chain of custody protocols. When Maria LaGuerta discovered a blood slide at Travis Marshall's crime scene in Season 6 finale, Dexter managed to avoid exposure through evidence tampering, manipulation, and ultimately Deborah's intervention. LaGuerta connected the slide to the Bay Harbor butcher pattern and pursued Dexter through Season 7, culminating in the shipyard confrontation. She obtained phone records and warrants that placed both Dexter and Deborah at the Travis Marshall crime scene. She even arranged Hector Estrada's release from prison, using him as bait to catch Dexter in the act. In the Season 7 finale, LaGuerta had Dexter cornered at a shipping yard, but Deborah shot her before she could expose him. Following LaGuerta's death, her theory lost momentum inside Miami Metro and the lead went cold. Dexter's survival hinged on 3 factors: LaGuerta conducting a lone wolf investigation, Miami Metro's willingness to dismiss her findings after her death, and the absence of proper evidence protocols. He planted counter-evidence, manipulated witnesses, and ultimately relied on his sister killing a police captain to protect him. These tactics worked because LaGuerta operated without institutional backup, and because Miami Metro wanted to believe their colleague wasn't a serial killer. But here's a critical flaw: the FBI doesn't operate like this. The FBI's multi-layered evidence handling system and institutional oversight makes evidence tampering virtually impossible and ensure investigations continue regardless of individual agents. Federal evidence facilities employ layered physical security, access control, logging, and separation of duties. When physical evidence enters an FBI laboratory, it's photographed, cataloged, and processed by specialists who have no connection to the investigation. Processing the slide would reignite the Bay Harbor butcher's signature and force broader review, though CODIS would not identify Dexter unless his DNA or biological trace was on the slide itself. However, CODIS could connect unknowns across scenes, and the FBI's VICAP database cross-references details on thousands of violent crimes across the country, looking for patterns in victim types, geographic locations, and crime scene signatures. If the FBI had found that blood slide, Dexter's options would have evaporated immediately. Once evidence is logged into federal systems with audit trails and role separation, a single actor cannot secretly remove all traces of it. Most critically, even if LaGuerta had died under identical circumstances, the investigation wouldn't have died with her. The FBI assigns cases to teams, not individuals, and case documentation and digital work product are shared across teams and systems. So the loss of one local file would not end the paper trail. When Angel Batista discovered LaGuerta's investigation files, one person could dismiss them. In the FBI system, those case files would have existed across multiple systems, accessible to dozens of agents, making their disappearance impossible. So the winner in this case would be the FBI. Dexter's evidence tampering worked against a local department with minimal oversight. Against FBI protocols designed specifically to prevent exactly what he did, his access to evidence would have been his downfall, not his salvation. But before we dive deeper into how the FBI's surveillance would have caught Dexter, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because the close calls we're about to examine get even more revealing. The blood slide was just the beginning. Dexter's most dangerous moment actually came much earlier, when James Dokes discovered his trophy collection, and everything should have ended right there. When Dokes discovered Dexter's blood slide collection, Dexter survived only because Dokes acted alone, and Lila Tornay killed Dokes before he could expose the truth. In Season 2, Dokes found the slide box, tested independently, confronted Dexter, was held at the Everglades cabin, and Lila caused the explosion. Dokes had chosen to test the slides himself, rather than immediately alerting the FBI task force led by Special Agent Frank Lundy. This decision gave Dexter time to react. After their confrontation in the Everglades, where Dokes caught Dexter with dismembered remains, Dexter locked him in a cabin. Before Dexter could decide his next move, Lila found the cabin and killed Dokes by triggering a gas explosion. The explosion and surrounding circumstances drove Miami Metro to close the case on Dokes as the Bay Harbor butcher. Dokes' fatal error was going rogue. He had the smoking gun, physical evidence that could have ended Dexter's killing spree immediately. But his personal vendetta led him to operate outside of proper channels. This gave Dexter time to react, adapt, and ultimately survive. Dokes' solo operation meant no backup, no institutional support, and no failsafe if something went wrong. The FBI wouldn't have made Dokes' mistake. FBI investigation into serial killers involved multiple agents working simultaneously, with evidence immediately shared across teams and documented in central systems that prevent any single agent from controlling the outcome. When the FBI investigates serial killers, the Behavioral Analysis Unit shapes the behavioral picture and coordination, while evidence custody, scene processing, and lab analysis run through the FBI laboratory and evidence response teams. The case of Dennis Rader, BTK killer, demonstrates this approach. Multiple FBI agents worked alongside local police, with evidence processed at FBI laboratories and findings shared across jurisdictions. When they traced the metadata on a floppy disk Ratter sent them, it was coordinated effort between cyber specialists, behavioral analysts, and field investigators. Similarly, during the Ted Bundy manhunts, FBI agents across multiple states shared information through VICAP, coordinated surveillance efforts, and maintained constant communication. If Dokes had been an FBI agent who discovered those blood slides, the moment he found them would have triggered a multi-agent response. FBI protocol requires that evidence of this magnitude be immediately photographed, documented, and reported to supervising agents. The slides would enter the FBI system, creating permanent records with CODIS potentially connecting unknowns across scenes and VICAP surfacing cross-case patterns. Together with targeted surveillance, these outputs could converge on Dexter. There would be no cabin standoff because there would be no opportunity for Dokes to act alone. The FBI's institutional structure prevents exactly the kind of lone wolf investigation that gave Dexter time to escape. So once again, the winner is the FBI. Dokes' solo operation gave Dexter a fighting chance. The FBI's multi-agent coordination eliminates that window entirely, turning potential evidence into immediate investigation with no escape route. While Dokes represented Dexter's closest brush with human detection, his technological mistake left even more damning evidence that Miami Metro overlooked, but the FBI's forensic capabilities would have exploited mercilessly. After Lila killed Dokes by exploding the Everglades cabin, digital traces that guided Lila to the location were never properly investigated, evidence that could have unraveled the entire Bay Harbor Butcher frame job. Lila used some form of tracking to find the remote cabin where Dexter had imprisoned Dokes. When the explosion occurred, Miami Metro processed the scene, collected evidence, and closed the case without thoroughly investigating how Lila or anyone could have located such an isolated spot. Digital traces that guided Lila to the cabin, such as phone or navigation logs, are exactly the kind of artifacts a federal scene team would extract and correlate. The chaotic nature of the explosion and the department's eagerness to close a high-profile case allowed crucial technological evidence to go unexamined. This represents one of Dexter's luckiest escapes. Miami Metro's crime scene investigation was rushed, focused on confirming Dokes as the Bay Harbor Butcher rather than scrutinizing every piece of evidence. Questions about how the cabin was located, whose technology might have been involved, and what digital footprints existed never got asked because Miami Metro saw what they wanted to see, a closed case. But FBI crime scene analysts don't close cases, they dissect them. FBI evidence response teams use systematic scene processing and forensic analysis protocols that would have identified and traced digital evidence within the investigation timeline. The FBI employs specialized evidence response teams trained in systematic scene processing. These teams photograph crime scenes comprehensively, use technology to locate electronic evidence, even in debris, and catalog every recovered item using digital evidence management systems. When the FBI investigates explosion sites, they bring in specialized units, including bomb data center analysts who reconstruct blast patterns and identify all foreign objects. In the case of the Unabomber, FBI agents recovered and analyzed fragments of devices to build their case. Similarly, after the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, FBI forensic teams reconstructed evidence from tons of debris, identifying the vehicle used and tracing it back to the perpetrators through a vehicle identification fragment. If the FBI had processed that cabin explosion, their evidence response team would have conducted a systematic search of the entire site. They would have investigated how Lila located the cabin, examining phone records, cell tower data, and any digital devices recovered from the scene. This investigation would have revealed patterns of travel to and from the location, communications between involved parties, and technological traces that contradicted the narrative that Dokes acted alone. The FBI wouldn't need perfect physical evidence. They would simply follow the digital trail, and that trail would have raised questions that Miami Metro never asked. So the winner in this case, once again, is the FBI. Local investigators miss crucial evidence in a chaotic scene. FBI evidence response teams are specifically trained to find what local departments overlook, using systematic processes that make oversights far less likely. But what do you think? Would the FBI's crime scene technology would have caught Dexter years earlier? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Digital forensics weren't the only area where Dexter exploited Miami Metro's vulnerabilities. His surveillance footage deletion shows just how fragile single-point evidence systems can be. When Miami Metro installed surveillance cameras at Coral Cove Marina to catch the Bay Harbor Butcher, they captured footage of Dexter cleaning his boat, but he deleted it by pulling a fire alarm and accessing the evidence during the chaos. As the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation intensified, Miami Metro set up surveillance at local marinas. Cameras recorded Dexter cleaning his boat late at night, behavior that would have flagged him as suspicious. When Dexter learned about the footage, he pulled the fire alarm at the station, creating chaos that allowed him to tamper with the evidence before anyone reviewed it. Local single-point storage made tampering feasible, removing the most direct visual proof of his involvement. Once again, Dexter survived through quick thinking and systemic weakness. The fire alarm distraction worked because the station lacked security protocols to prevent unauthorized evidence access during emergencies. Most critically, inadequate backup systems meant that once Dexter compromised the file, recovery became difficult or impossible. This vulnerability made evidence tampering not just possible, but relatively simple for someone with Dexter's access and knowledge. The FBI's surveillance infrastructure eliminates this vulnerability. FBI surveillance operations employ multiple layers of redundancy and automatic backup systems that make footage deletion by a single individual functionally impossible. FBI systems use redundant, audited storage and role-based access. Reviews are scheduled and logged across teams. Once evidence enters federal custody, access is controlled, audited, and distributed across systems that a single local actor cannot alter. High-value surveillance is typically reviewed on set schedules by multiple analysts, reducing any window for tampering. Additionally, FBI evidence management systems create automatic audit trails. Any attempts to access, modify, or delete surveillance footage generates alerts and logs. The FBI learned these lessons from past evidence tampering cases and built systems specifically designed to prevent internal corruption. If the FBI had been running the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation with their surveillance systems, Dexter's fire alarm strategy would have been ineffective. A federal setup with redundant audited storage would preserve originals and flag the access attempt. The moment he attempted to access the evidence system, his credentials would have been logged, creating a permanent record of his tampering attempt. More critically, federal protocols typically ensure that surveillance footage of this importance receives timely review, meaning analysts might have already flagged Dexter's behavior before he knew the cameras existed. The FBI's redundant systems don't just make evidence tampering difficult, they make it detectably futile, ensuring that anyone who tries leaves more evidence of their guilt. So once again, the winner here is the FBI. Dexter exploited a single point of failure in Miami Metro's evidence storage. The FBI's redundant systems and automatic audit trails would have turned his tampering attempt into additional evidence against him, while preserving the original footage. These individual close calls were dangerous enough, but the real threat to Dexter wasn't any single piece of evidence. It was the pattern they created, something Miami Metro never assembled, but the FBI is specifically designed to detect. Throughout the series, Dexter accumulated dozens of suspicious coincidences that individually seemed innocent, but collectively formed a damning pattern that Miami Metro never assembled. Consider the accumulation. Dexter was at the wedding reception where Santos Barnes disappeared. He had professional contact with nearly every suspect who vanished from Miami Metro's radar. He was photographed near Travis Marshall's church before the fire. He was Kyle Butler, the mysterious stranger who befriended Arthur Mitchell just before Mitchell disappeared. He had forensic access to evidence in dozens of cases where suspects later died under suspicious circumstances. Any one of these facts could be explained away, but collectively, they represented a mathematical impossibility. One person shouldn't be connected to this many suspicious events unless they were causing them. Miami Metro investigated these incidents in isolation. When LaGuerta found Dexter in the wedding photo, it was just one photo in one investigation. When Doak suspected him, it was personal vendetta rather than pattern analysis. When Quinn hired Liddy to follow him, it was based on gut feeling rather than systematic evidence compilation. No one at Miami Metro ever aggregated all the suspicious coincidences into a single timeline and asked the obvious question, what are the odds that one forensic analyst would be peripherally connected to this many unsolved murders? The FBI's VICAP system was built specifically to see what Miami Metro missed. The FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program uses pattern recognition and cross-jurisdictional data analysis to identify connections that human investigators miss, potentially flagging suspects who appear in multiple investigations. VICAP, established in 1985, maintains detailed information on thousands of violent crimes across the United States. When investigators enter case details, VICAP compares them against every other case in the database, identifying similarities in method, victim type, geographic location, and timing. If Miami Metro fed consistent case details into VICAP and linked persons and locations, the system could surface cross-case patterns that humans miss. The system can identify when a person shows up in multiple investigations, even in peripheral roles. Additionally, the FBI uses link analysis software that visualizes connection between people, places, and events, revealing patterns that aren't obvious in isolated case files. If Miami Metro cases had been entered into VICAP with consistent data entry and cross-jurisdiction sharing, VICAP and link analysis could flag repeated proximity by the same analyst, prompting surveillance. The system would have noticed that Dexter Morgan appeared in files of multiple major investigations. It would have flagged that he was a forensic analyst with access to evidence in cases where evidence later went missing. Geographic analysis would have shown him present at locations connected to multiple disappearances. Timeline analysis would have revealed suspicious correlations. These aren't insights that require brilliant detective work. They're outputs of pattern recognition designed to identify serial offenders who hide in plain sight. With consistent data entry and cross-jurisdiction sharing, such patterns could trigger investigation, and from that moment, every one of Dexter's careful rituals would have become evidence against him. So once again, the winner in this case is the FBI. Miami Metro investigated incidents in isolation, missing the pattern. With proper data sharing, the FBI's VICAP system could have assembled these isolated incidents into a concerning profile. Dexter Morgan survived scores of close calls over 8 seasons, escaping exposure through quick thinking, evidence tampering, lucky timing, and the murder of those who discovered his secret. Each escape felt like a victory, another day living the double life, another kill ritual completed without consequences. But every single one of those escapes depended on a crucial factor. He was evading a local police department with limited resources, siloed investigations, and exploitable vulnerabilities. The blood slide LaGuardia found would have entered FBI chain of custody protocols that Dexter couldn't breach. Digital traces Miami Metro overlooked would have been recovered by FBI evidence response teams trained to extract and correlate such evidence. The surveillance footage he deleted would have existed in redundant federal storage with audit trails flagging his access attempt. The pattern of coincidences Miami Metro never assembled could have been surfaced by VICAP with consistent data entry and cross-jurisdiction sharing. Most critically, the lone wolf investigators that gave Dexter time to react, Dokes acting alone, LaGuardia pursuing her theory without backup, would have never happened under FBI protocols that require team coordination and institutional oversight. Dexter's intelligence was surgical. The FBI's intelligence is systemic. Dexter cleaned crime scenes meticulously. The FBI had forensic technology that finds evidence invisible to the human eye. Dexter builds masks that fool the people around him. The FBI has behavioral profiles built from interviews with dozens of killers exactly like him. Dexter relied on luck and chaos to survive his mistakes. The FBI has redundant systems specifically designed to eliminate luck as a factor. The FBI doesn't need to be smarter than Dexter. They just need to be more systematic. And they are, by design, by decades of refinement, by institutional knowledge built from catching hundreds of serial killers who thought that they were too clever to be caught. If Dexter had operated in a world where the FBI was actively hunting him instead of Miami Metro cleaning up after him, his killing spree wouldn't have lasted 8 seasons. The moment the FBI established coordination, deployed their technology, and activated their institutional infrastructure, every mistake Dexter made would have led them closer to his door. The game wouldn't have been close. It would have been over before Dexter even realized that it had begun. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next in-depth analysis.